It's on the bags.
I know, we had a lot.
Was the only one there?
I'm here. Hello. Sorry.
Hello. Where's
That's all right.
everybody else?
Because it records from the very beginning, I always turn it all off until you come. Otherwise, you hear like, my husband and me chatting and whatever, whatnot.
That might be interesting.
Usually not so much. I don't know. I was worried I was late, so I also was wondering where people were.
We'll give a few minutes.
We'll see who comes.
How have you been?
Very well, thank you. How are you guys?
Can't complain.
I'm sorry, there's so much loss in your community. Was that 2 announcements yesterday?
Yeah.
Wow.
2 announcements yesterday, 2 earlier in the week. I guess it's
Oh my gosh.
one of my friends says bad things come in threes. So I don't know if this is the end of the threes or the beginning of the threes. So
Oh, I hope so. I hope the end.
I hope so. Yeah. But this is what happens. And they weren't young people. So it doesn't make it easier, but it's not, none of them, I don't think, were tragic. They were sick. One last week was someone who had been in hospice. People were sick. So
I was noting that now that I get your newsletter, that I was sorry for your communal loss over the last day, the few notices that went
thank you. But we also have new members and young families, and
as
there's
life
bar
should be.
mitzvah this weekend. So
There is? Great.
yeah, there's one. Actually, the next 3 weeks there's bar and bat mitzvahs.
Wow.
So
Oh, and how do you do that at Shul now? Is that all on Zoom, or do people?
it's mostly, I think it's the one this weekend is all Sunday Zoom. I don't know about next weekend. They made, there was someone that just had the immediate family in Shul, because we do have a minyan, and there's 20 or 30 people, and then so it's some combination of Zoom and in person, but mostly Zoom.
Yeah, it's a hard time, I guess, to have a simcha.
Well, if the kids are really practicing and learning, some of them want to perform. Some of them are probably thrilled to not have to perform for everybody.
It does take the pressure off. We have a good friend here who is pushing her daughter to get married during this time period because she feels like it would just be a more relaxed, nice wedding. They're not. Why are you laughing?
Her mother is pushing her into thinking it's gonna be more relaxed. So it's relaxed. Sorry.
Will is questioning how relaxed it will be, whether it's big or small. But
well, we have my son got engaged in February last year, and they started planning the wedding, and then they put it all off. And they went back and forth, and many people felt a small wedding would be fantastic, but
they do.
But some people did not, and they decided just to put off the whole wedding. So
it's a hard choice. How are you guys, Jerry and Tamar?
I keep saying so far so good.
That's good. I hope you're well too, Barry. Excellent. All right, well, I guess we can get started with the group we have and see what happens. I'm excited. So let me pull up the source sheet here. Whoops, too many windows. Okay. So this week is, I had to record the video for your shul, the Parsha video. Not had to, I got to.
That's going to go out tomorrow morning. It's going to be a very lovely surprise for everybody.
Well, let me tell you, that is definitely the hardest thing Ravari's ever asked me to do. I think I did it like 6 million times before my husband convinced me it was fine. So I won't give too much away. We have a different topic for tonight. I didn't want to penalize you guys for learning with us now, or the other way around. Hello, Nelson. So let's see. So let's share the screen. So I wanted to think tonight about finding our breath, what it means to be without breath. I have found the last 10 months to be a bit breathtaking and not in the good way. And so it really struck me as I read the Parsha this time around. So I thought we would start, let me just move you guys to the top, there we go. I thought we would start by looking at this pasuk, which is at, fairly close to the beginning of this week's Parsha, where Moshe has come back to talk to Bnei Israel. And so last week, right after the burning bush, the sneh, which we looked at, Moshe comes and talks to the people, and they're very excited to be redeemed, right? They've been crying out. And now some time has elapsed and not a lot has happened. And Moshe comes back, and this time he gets not as good of a reception. And if you watch my Parsha video tomorrow, you'll learn that, I think the process, the middle between the promise of redemption and the actual Exodus is like a really long time period in our story, and that's a hard thing. Watching my kids wait for like 3 minutes for something is hard. So if you could only imagine, the longer the period stretches. So this pasuk says, "V'yedaber Moshe chen el bnei Yisrael v'lo sham'u el Moshe." Right. So Bnei Israel starts to tell Moshe starts to tell Hashem's message to Bnei Israel, and they did not listen. And the reasons cited are from Kotzer Ruach and Avodah Kasha. And so here that's translated as their spirits were crushed by cruel bondage. But Kotzer Ruach is a sort of unclear term. This is the Sefaria translation. And many of the commentaries, ranging from very old to very modern, think about what that could mean. So I thought we'd look through a whole laundry list of them and try to develop sort of a well-rounded thought about what that is. So Rashi gives a very literal translation. He says, "Mikotzer ruach, kol mi shehu meitzar." Anyone who is distressed, whose spirit is distressed, rucho unishmato ktsara, ve'eno yachol laha'arich benishmato. He's not able to draw a deep breath, or she. So I wonder, how would you categorize Rashi's definition? What kind of affliction is kotzer ruach? Physical, the doctor, of course. Right. I read an article by
Ask
Rabbi
the pulmonologist. Ask the pulmonologist.
Exactly. I totally agree. Rabbi Benny Lau said, right, it's like Bnei Israel were like someone in the middle of an asthma attack, right? A pulmonologist. And they, Moshe was saying, don't worry, like the inhaler's in the mail, it'll come in a few months. And Bnei Israel's like, no, I'm having my asthma attack now. Like, I can't listen to anything because I'm in physical distress. I totally agree. Excellent. The Sforno takes a slightly different bent. Right, the Sforno says, "Mikotzer ruach ki lo ne'amna et el rucham v'lo natnu lev lehitbonen." Right, that it did not appear believable in their present state of mind. Their heart couldn't assimilate a promise such as the one Moshe was making for them at that time. So what kind of affliction does the Sforno think Kotzer ruach is?
I think it's psychosomatic. He's talking about the present state of mind, and it gets straight to his heart and implicitly to the breath, and he cannot assimilate such a promise. So I think the mind is telling the spirit, I cannot do it.
Nice. I was going to say spiritual. So I think you encapsulated both, right?
Well,
that it's the mind and the spirit.
The translation leaves out like an important thing, right?
Tell me what? This is not my translation, but yes.
Lo nemana et el rucham. They didn't.
Right, didn't believe. at
in their
El.
present state of mind. Oh, okay, maybe, yeah. No, I misread it. Okay,
Yeah, I don't think it's referring to God.
okay.
Um,
I
But
don't
it
know,
is
what
an-
does that word mean then,
an
El?
awkward phrasing. I'm not sure. At El Rucham. Maybe if I were translating it, I might have translated it as like God's given spirit, like still theirs. I'm not sure that it is referring to God. That's a good question. I'd have to take a closer look
Anyway,
in Sfaria. I don't know who does the translations that are more accurate are the ones in which there are vowels, like vocalization in the Hebrew. That is what I have found. I don't know who does their translations, but as they get cleaned up, they vocalize the Hebrew as well. So sometimes the English does not match appropriately to the Hebrew. But I would agree with Nelson that there is certainly some kind of spiritual, maybe intellectual component here that their heart could not understand, right? Lichit bonein, like it couldn't make a judgment, it couldn't make a calculation about the promise that Hashem was making them.
It sounds like depression to me. If someone's depressed, it's hard for them to recognize that something good is going to happen in the future.
Oh, nice. I like that. Yeah, definitely an emotional component. I agree, Barry. And I think, we'll see that some of them start to overlap a bit, because I think I would say maybe some of that depression is here too in the Ramban, right? Where the Ramban says that it's not that they didn't believe, right? It wasn't a spiritual crisis, maybe as the Sforno is saying. It's that they really couldn't hear. Rak shelo hatu ozen l'dvarav mikotze ruach, right? Because when a person is so fully immersed in their toil, right, that they don't want to really feel the pain in that moment, because they sort of think they'll breathe later. Like it almost to me is like a put your head down and push through kind of reaction. And so that's one answer that the Ramban gives. And then the other is that shortness of breath also refers to the fear of Paro, that he might kill them even if he caught them just taking a breath, stopping to catch their breath. And so I think here that not wanting to be immersed in the pain of the moment and sort of thinking I'll breathe later, I think definitely is sort of that emotional component. And I think that the fear also relates to that psychosomatic, right? That there's some kind of intellectual, Paro has created a situation where they're so scared that they don't even want to breathe. Anything else? Any other? These are the three sort of classical commentaries. And then we're going to jump centuries.
Yeah, I'm thinking that when God created man, he breathed the spirit into men directly from God's mouth. I don't know. That's just an association. I don't know how to integrate it with the text here, but I think it's there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yael,
Yes.
I was just wondering, the Ramban refers to Moshe as a prophet. Does anyone else, it sounds unusual to me, or am I wrong? Does anyone else, is Moshe referred to as a prophet in any other setting or by any other?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if it's in the text itself, but like lo kam navi od, right? Like another prophet like Moshe never came to be is like a phrase. I think it comes from the commentaries.
Okay.
So certainly, right, he's not a Navi the way we think of like Eliyahu or some of that later stage of prophets, like that all sort of were clumped together. But certainly Moshe is thought of, at least in the commentaries, that way.
Okay.
And Nelson, I think that you are right on target. I did not bring any of those sources, but I saw a lot about that idea that Hashem breathes life into us, and that ruach is sort of what fills us. And so when we're kotzer ruach, we've lost that divine connection. I think that's a very beautiful translation. I really like it. So Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, much more modern German commentary, talks about another aspect, another lens. Here he says, does someone else want to read? I certainly don't. We don't have to listen to me the whole time. All in English, no pressure.
The inhumanity of the present weighed heavily upon them, and the need to meet its demands and to find for themselves even a momentary respite sapped all their strength. They were drained of all spirit and did not have the energy to turn their thoughts to the future of which Moshe wished to speak to them. They were so pressed by the demands of the present and so burdened by their work that they did not even have the patience to listen to him quietly.
Thank you.
That last sentence is what's really common to all of the commentators up to now. That's the heart of the matter. It's also obvious from the text. That's what it means too. I don't see really what they're, these different commentators, I think they're not particularly in touch with each other, and they're saying much the same thing.
Interesting. That's so interesting, Jerry. So I have to tell you, I felt like the first three were very different. And I think you're right that Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch is sort of riffing off of some of them. And I love that to you that the last sentence is so obvious. I have to admit that to me, I thought like, oh, he sort of articulated something that maybe I didn't understand from the first three, which is why I brought him to the page. I think you intuited, you must have the same brain as Rabbi Hirsch, right? That with Rashi, to me, I don't sense the spiritual or emotional component. To me, that feels very physical. Very much that the physical burden of a lack of breath, like when you have an anxiety attack, you know, there is some emotional component, but it's physically that you can't breathe, or an asthma attack, right? No emotional component. And that then the Sforno adds this part about the heart, right? This emotional part about it didn't appear believable. Right, which I think is actually kind of in contrast to the Ramban, where he's saying, no, they did believe, they did, right? I actually almost do hear it as like a conversation between the three, right? Rashi saying, guys, this is the physical, and the Sforno saying, no, this is emotional. This goes much deeper, Rashi, than that, the shortness of breath that you might feel during an asthma attack. And the Ramban saying, wait a second, Sforno, it's not a crisis of faith. Kotzar Ruach isn't not being able to believe in God. It's being so emotionally oppressed that they aren't able to focus on it, but the belief is still there, sort of waiting for the day in which they'll be able to breathe later. I don't know if that makes sense, or it's not, it's not your read, which is totally fine also. And then I agree that the Rabbi Hirsch, I think, is very much building off the Ramban. And maybe, as you said, maybe it is intuitive to you that it's about a patience. But for me, that was a new piece, the idea about the patience, that whatever it was, whether it was physical or spiritual or intellectual or emotional, that it was contributing to a lack of patience. That was not obvious to me, especially not from Rashi. But I welcome your thoughts also. Uh-oh, I've caused silence over there. I think maybe let's see if the next two are sort of a different angle, or if you feel like it is more of the same. I mean, on some level, everything sort of builds into each other. I think there's no one factor, since it clearly wasn't an asthma attack, right? When you have an anxiety attack, my understanding, I've been blessed to not have such a thing in my life, is that when you get to the ER, they have to sort of figure out what's causing it, right? I've been doing my chaplaincy internship, so now I'm a medical expert too. And and they ask you lots of questions, right? Are you anxious about something? Did you eat something bad, right? Is there something coming up for you? Did you suffer a loss? Because it's hard to sometimes tease out the response from the reason behind it. So the Mesilat Yesharim, the book, The Path of the Upright, a classic Musar text, wants to think about what we can take out of this, right? That I would say the classical commentaries through Rabbi Hirsch are very much focused on Bnei Israel's experience. And I think that now we're going to split into what we can draw from Bnei Israel's experience. So here in the Mesilat Yesharim, he says, this is in fact one of the cunning artifices of the evil Yetzer, I'm having trouble reading today, who always imposes upon men such strenuous tasks that they have no time left to note whither they are drifting. This ingenuity is somewhat like that of Paro, who commanded, let heavier work be laid upon men. For Paro's purpose was not only to prevent the Israelites from having any leisure to make plans against him, but by subjecting them to unceasing toil, to deprive them also of the opportunity to reflect. And I think, I'm not always such a Musar movement kind of person, but I think what he does here is brilliant. To say that Paro is like our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, and that it keeps us very busy, so that we suffer from Kotzer Ruach. And what is Kotzer Ruach? Similarly, maybe to an impatience is, I think, a little bit deeper, is that there's this lack of opportunity to reflect. Recently, my husband and I have gotten very into yoga. We do yoga with Adrienne. I highly recommend her yoga YouTube sensation. And she doesn't talk about this actually, but in yoga, there's this idea of the monkey brain, that when you do yoga, you're meant to quiet your brain. Your brain jumps from like limb to limb, and that to be able to really grow, to reflect, you need to be able to quiet your monkey brain. And that is kind of what I hear through my new yoga lens in the Mesilat Yesharim, that Paro, the Yetzer Hara, the monkey brain, doesn't allow us to stop. It causes us to have to focus on the anxiety attack and not the reason behind the anxiety attack. And that if we can clear the Paro away, that then we can reflect. And when we can reflect and when we can listen to Moshe, to Hashem, to our inner Yetzer HaTov, whatever that thing is, that's when we'll be able to reflect and grow.
I'm still stuck with the first breath, the first spirit, the first ruach that went to man. And now here, Pharaoh is doing the opposite of what God did in the beginning. He is imposing such a law that makes it impossible for man to breathe, to experience the spirit, to reflect, to do all the things that life requires. So, and like the Mesilat Yesharim says in the beginning, the cunning artifices of the evil Yetzer, the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, is the opposite of God, like trying to suppress man. So man is between God and Pharaoh right there.
I love that. Go ahead.
I think that part of the reason they're asking the question at all isn't just that it's weird words, Kotzer Ruach. It's that you would have thought that they were just waiting their whole lives for Moshe to come in and give them this news. This is what's going to happen. And that's why it's a question. Like, and they just ignore them. They don't even listen. Like, this is what they've been waiting for 210 years. And then he walks in and they're like, we can't even listen to you. And I think that's what maybe the Mesilat Yesharim is saying a little bit also, right? This is what you should always be looking for in your life, this ruach of God and spirituality. But we get so caught up with our daily routine that we forget to look for it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that. Sort of burning up. I promise I had nothing to drink at dinner. Building off of the burning bush of last week, right? We're like, how often do we walk by God in the bush and not even think to turn our head, right? I love that here also, how often is God or Moshe, the Moshes of our life, giving us a message and we're like too busy to hear it. That's beautiful. And yes, I love that idea, Nelson, of like Hashem blowing the breath in and Paro coming and pushing it out, right? It's almost like a battle between the two of where the Ruach goes. Do we have Nachat Ruach, right, from Hashem, or do we have Kotzer Ruach from Paro? That's beautiful. The last source that I brought on the page is from Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, the Rebbe, the Piacenza Rebbe, who is known as the Eish Kodesh, which is the book that he wrote. And he is a Rebbe living in the ghetto in during the Holocaust in the 1930s and 40s. And he wrote down many of his Shabbat drashot in a little book that somehow, it's not the books that were buried and then found in Warsaw, after by the construction worker. I'm trying to remember what collection that was. This somehow got smuggled here and there, and somehow it made its way to Israel. And someone published it under the title The Eish Kodesh. And it's a beautiful work. It's actually something we're learning in yeshiva this year, but every drasha would take like 6 hours to unpack totally. And I found this very helpful summary of the drasha that he gave in 1939. If you have the book of the Eish Kodesh, it's pages 33 and 34. But this from OU Torah, you could click on the link to read his take on the Kotzer Ruach, but it's very helpful. So the Eish Kodesh wrote that under the conditions of avodah kasha, of very difficult toil, that one loses the spirit of life, sort of, I think, what you're talking about, Nelson. As this author points out, right, Rabbi Shapiro knew all too well the meaning of difficult toil, enslaved as he and his congregation were in the ghetto. And he knew how they were struggling to do God's will despite their dire straits, right? So here, I think the Rebbe, because he is living under such harsh conditions, he doesn't want to read Bnei Israel as apathetic, right? The way that you maybe a little bit were, Dan. He wants to really say that no, they want to do God's will. There's something else in the way there. And he witnessed their attempts to help each other to maintain faith in God, perform whatever rituals they could, but he also observed that their tortured souls could not muster the spirit of life necessary for religious action. And so Kotzer Ruach is like a shortness of vitality, of an ability to do mitzvot with enthusiasm, the way they're sort of meant to be done. And that it was very much an affliction put upon Bnei Israel, that they were not so much, I think, in control of, but what he was encouraging his community was to find that nachat ruach, the love of Hashem, and to be able to infuse that into their mitzvot and their belief in God at such a hard time. And I think it's a little depressing given his circumstance, but also very inspiring to think that even in such hard times, that their community was looking for the ruach, even when they were short on it. I recently heard a class where someone said that every source sheet should have a well-balanced gender and age, and it's not always possible, but I did find this quote from Aviva Zorenberg, which does not really fit into the line, but I put it up here on top in the hopes that you'll join me on a sort of unconventional last source. So Aviva Zorenberg wrote in The Particulars of Rapture, which is a beautiful book, to hear is to open oneself up to vulnerability, change, and contingency. And she is talking about what was the issue here. She's focusing less on the Kotzer Ruach and more on the Velo Shamu El Moshe, right? And that she was saying Bnei Israel, their Kotzer Ruach was not allowing themselves to hear. And what's so important about hearing, right? If this was just sort of the PA broadcast announcement about what to do in order to be redeemed, right? Does it really matter? Couldn't they have read the bulletin later or listened to their neighbor? But there was something very important about this hearing, about opening up to vulnerability, to change, to learning about oneself. And so I thought, if you guys are interested, totally no pressure, everyone can slip off quietly if they want, that we might want to do 2 to 3 minutes of a breathing exercise. I found one related sort of directly. If this is too crunchy, I totally understand. But I found it very meaningful when I practiced, to see if we should do it. I'm going to stop the share for a second. And to say that I think there is something about using Rashi's pathway of physical Kotzer Ruach to then sort of jump to that more emotional, spiritual, intellectual component to think about how breathing more deeply and being able to listen to ourselves, to our own bodies, to Hashem's voice, wherever that comes from, inside or outside of us, that those really do follow each other. And there is a lovely midrasha in Israel that wrote sort of a breathing practice for this week's Parsha. And they observed that maybe sort of like the Mesilat Yesharim, right? That the Avodah Kasha and the Kotzer Ruach is what blocks Hashem's voice from within us, which I thought was beautiful because, right, it's unlikely that Moshe or anyone carrying God's message is going to show up at our workplace tomorrow. But, right, that if we think about those things as coming from inside of us, thinking about what our sort of role is in the world, that then we could relax our breathing to a place where we let go of anxiety and worry and stress, and that those things lead us to sort of close ourselves off from family and friends, from Hashem, like our divine voice inside of us. And that's sort of where B'nai Israel was, and not that as breathing exercise would help B'nai Israel at a time of physical slavery, right, or the Piazetzna's community, but that in us, thank God, most of us are not physically afflicted, and so that this might just be a nice way to ease ourselves into Shabbat. I know that I personally have felt very out of breath over the last 10 months at different times, physically out of breath from running after my children in my house on like day, who knows what of a lockdown, but sort of like emotionally out of breath, knowing that this was going on, emotionally out of breath, not being able to see my family. If anyone wants to share a time that they felt Kotzer Ruach, I would certainly welcome that. But there seem to be so many, at least for me.
Interesting. I saw one tonight in the office, and I've seen a few people in the last few months, teenagers in particular, who come in there fine, but they have this complaint. I feel like I can't take a full breath. And you watch them do it, and their oxygenation is fine, and their exam is fine, and everything is fine, but they just like, I can breathe, I don't feel short of breath, but I feel like I can't take a full breath.
So interesting.
That's what pulmonologists call psychogenic dyspnea.
I understand that. No, I know, but it's part, I just brought that up because of this.
I confirm. Yeah,
That's
exactly
what I tell them. I say I say you're fine. Yeah.
That's the anxiety. The anxiety
exactly.
of the time. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's exactly what Yael was saying.
Yeah.
I have an oximeter because my cousin is a little bit anxious about COVID, to put it mildly, and we're a pod. And so every morning he measures his oxygenation of his blood. And I have felt that way, that there are days where it's hard for me to breathe, but I'm at 99% on my little reader, so I don't even go to the doctor to complain, but I feel for those people, because I really do understand it. And I thank God have not been a person who trends towards anxiety in life. So I think the last 10 months have given me a lot of empathy for those who feel that way more regularly.
And they know they're anxious, and they come in and they say, I know it's just anxiety, but
they want to share it with you.
They just want to make sure it's just anxiety, even though they know it's anxiety.
And do they feel better then?
They feel better when you tell them they're not dying.
And isn't that so interesting that your words there ease the blockage in their breathing in a way that medicine would not be able to, right? When it's not physical, you need something else to open up your lungs. And I did mean to say at the beginning that I do think there's an unfortunate connection between Kotzer Ruach and COVID affliction, right? And that often you are not able to breathe, literally. And that, lo aleinu, none of us should experience that kind of shortness of breath. It should all remain in our heads and not in our bodies. Okay. Okay, so anyone who wants to do this, I meant to like find some soothing music and I forgot. So we'll just sit in our quietness and we'll ask our chef in the kitchen to be quiet. So there's no banging. And if you want to, I invite you to close your eyes so you don't feel self-conscious, and to sit up sort of straighter and comfortably in your chair, and to think about your breathing, right? That shortness of breath to lengthen and deepen that breathing. And to breathe in through your nose and then to sort of make like a soft noise, like a hey, the noise of Hashem, as you breathe out, and to concentrate on that sound to sort of close out everything else, all the monkey brain around you. And that to put your hands on your belly, as I'm sure a doctor could tell us, right? It's not good to breathe out of your chest only. So to let your belly fill with air first, and then sort of let that breath fill up through your lungs, your diaphragm, through your rib cage, and imagine, lifting your chest and your collarbone so that your breath is sort of filled all the way from your belly to your collarbone, and that to have that breath go in for like a slow 3 or 5 or 7, depending on what's comfortable, counts sort of in your brain, and then to hold it there for a minute and then to let it out in the opposite way it came in, so that it's sort of like a peak, right? So that then first to let it out of the top of your chest and then your rib cage and then your belly. And to focus on whatever you want to focus on, but I think to think about like what keeps you from breathing, what stops you from filling your body with the breath of Hashem, as Nelson said, right? Like the air that God breathed into us when we were born, and what has taken it out of us, and how can we put it back inside? So I guess I would invite us to do 3 to 5 breaths, and then we can say Shabbat Shalom together before we leave. And if you put your hands on your belly, I find that to be like a good physical reminder. I'll be quiet. Whenever people are ready, if they want to say goodbye, open our eyes. I hope that was calming and soothing, that we enter. Thank you, Barry. Good to know that I didn't lose you in the breathing. Everyone finds that breath of God over Shabbat, that we can escape our kotzer ruach and the own avodah kasha of our own making, and that we have a healthy and happy and breath-filled Shabbat. And I'll see you next Shabbat.
You too.
All right, Shabbat
Shabbat shalom,
Shalom.
everybody.
Bye-bye.